welcome to this late session here. ArcGIS Online, an introduction to security, privacy, and compliance. So my name is Andrea Rosso. I'm lead architect on ArcGIS Online, and I'm presenting here with Michael Young, who's our CISO for products. I assume most of you are familiar with ArcGIS Online, but ArcGIS Online is our multi-tenant software as a service platform, which allows you to subscribe to a virtual portal and within it have a full GIS. So you can upload your data, manage users, disseminate information, and so on. All of this is run by Esri on our infrastructure, and so because of that, there's questions about what you can control in terms of security, about the platform itself, about various compliance, and so on. So this is what we're going to try to address today here in this presentation. So I'm going to start off with information about what you can control, what I call platform security, the settings and things that you can do in the portal itself. And then Michael will talk a little bit more about deployment architectures and various use cases that customers are setting up with online, and then talk about compliance, and also talk a little about a new tool that we're developing to do a checkup on your organization in terms of security. So let me start the talk with platform security. So to understand the various pieces of what you can control, you have to start with fundamentals, which is what we call the portal information model. So there's four components to this. There's first of all the portal, which is what you work in. This is the thing that you log into and use. There are members or users. These represent your named users in the system. These members own items. Items is a generic name that we give to information, to data. And then there's groups, and groups are a way for you to share items with different members. So let me go through each one of these a little bit more. First of all, the portal. As I said, the portal is the place in which you log into, you work. We often refer to it as your organization or your subscription because you subscribe to ArcGIS Online, and that's sort of what you get when you subscribe. You get to choose a name for your portal and a URL. So in your URL, you can choose the first part, something.maps.arcgis.com, and then your users would then go to that URL and you see your information, log in, and work within your portal. You can set your portal to be public or private. Public means that when someone goes to that URL, they can actually see a front page, which you can customize. They can see your public items if you set it up that way, so they can see who you are and you can explain a little bit about yourself, about your organization. If you set it to private, then nothing is exposed of your organization, and users have to log in before they can actually see anything and do anything. And within this organization or this portal is also where you have a lot of different security settings that you can switch on and off, and I'll cover some of these as we go through this section. The second piece is your items. So items are, as I said, a generic name that we give to the information that you upload in your portal. They have a type, so there's about 40 different types now. For instance, web map, different types of layers, scenes, shape files, all kinds of different types. And when you create them, they are private by default. So your information is never shared out beyond yourself by default, and then from there you have to share it out to who you want. So you can share it out to groups, so that other groups of people inside the portal can see that information. You can share it out to your organization so everybody within that portal can see that information, or you can share it to everyone. And when we talk about everyone on ArcGIS Online, it means anonymous users, anybody on the internet. So anybody who comes to arcgis.com and does a search and finds your item, they can see the information. So it's truly public. And we even feed your information about the item to in our sitemaps so that search engines like Bing and Google can actually find it. So it's really out there. So you have to make sure that you really mean to make it public. Members, that's the third part. Members are your users. They represent your users. They own the items and the groups within your portal. They have a profile, so basic things like first name, last name, email, and also some biographical information that they can enter if they want to, so that they can talk about themselves in terms of what they do and who they are. They are in a portal discoverable to the organization, so everybody else within the portal can see the members within that portal, but the members themselves can actually control that and set themselves to be private, meaning no one can see them, or set themselves to be public, where anonymous users can see them. This is useful if, for instance, you have some public data sets you want to share out and you want people to know who you are and why your information is important. And then members have a role, and a role determines what they can do. So let's talk a little bit about roles. Roles, there's 4 built-in roles in the platform currently. One is the administrator. So anybody in the administrator role can do everything. This is your super user. They can manage users, manage all the data that's in the portal, set all the settings, and so on. Then we have a publisher. A publisher is a user who is not an administrator, but they can publish feature services and tiled services, basically hosted layers. Then there is a user. User role can still create information like maps, but they can't actually create any hosted layers. And then there's a viewer. A viewer is a read-only user who cannot create any information, but they can consume information. So they can see whatever they are allowed to see via groups and so on, but they can't actually create anything. If those 4 roles don't really satisfy what you need to do, then you can create custom roles based on fine-grained privileges. So you can set up combinations of these privileges to create the role that you want. We also offer some templates of roles that you can start from, for instance, an editor. And I have a screenshot here that was actually cut off because it's too long of all the different privileges that you can actually select from and create these combinations. And then you can assign those to your users or your members, and then they get these privileges. And then the last piece is the groups. Groups are a way for you to add members and add items, and all members within that group can access the items within that group. So for instance, you're sharing a web map between your project group of people who are working on something. So there's a slight permutation of groups where the owner of the group can also share whatever items they have access to into their group. So this is sort of a curator scenario where if you want to collect items that have a certain that are common and that you want to expose into the group, so that you can create collections that you expose to users. So for instance, the Living Atlas is such a group. So we have a group where we collect all the interesting data sets and other things that we want to have in there. And then we expose that, and people who go to that group can actually see all those items. Groups can also have a visibility, so they can be set to be private where nobody can find them. They can be set to be visible inside of the organization, or they can be set to be visible outside the organization anonymously to everyone. But this setting does not translate down to the items within the actual group. So the control of who sees the item is still at the owner level. So you could have a group that is public, and when an anonymous user goes to that group, they would see it empty if nothing inside of it was actually shared to the public by the owners who put items in that group. There's a specialized group that we call groups with update capabilities, which allows all members within that group to update the items within that group. So with regular groups, you can only read or you can only consume the items. In these types of groups, with update capabilities, you can actually modify the items. So because of that, we put some restrictions on what you can do. So they can only be created by admins currently, and they must have items and members that are only within the same organization. Whereas with regular groups, you can actually create groups that span multiple organizations. And you can't change that setting once that group has been created, so that you don't go back and forth with items that are already inside of the group. So this is especially useful, for instance, if you have a web map for emergency operations where you have multiple people coming in and going in shifts, trying to edit, say, fire boundaries inside of the web map or shelters and so on. It can also be used for collaborative editing, where you're trying to have multiple people all edit the same feature layer. So let's talk a little bit about editing of feature layers. So one powerful feature of ArcGIS Online is allowing you to create feature layers, which are then editable by multiple people. So you can have, say, field workers collecting information and upload or submitting them to your feature service or feature layer, and then using those in maps and so on. So now, when you create a feature layer, one thing to understand is you can always edit it if you're the owner, if you're an admin of that organization, or if you're a member of one of these groups with update capabilities in which this feature layer is inside of. So those three sets of users can always edit a feature layer. The feature layer also has this setting on it to enable editing. You only enable that if you want people who have access to that feature layer to be also able to edit. So if you enable that and the feature layer is shared to the organization, then everybody in the organization at that point can start editing. If it's public, that means that anonymous users can actually edit your feature layer, which is often not desirable. There are some crowdsourcing cases and use cases that are valid, but most of the time you want to be careful with that one and make sure that you're not setting editable feature layers to be public and shared to everybody. Once you make a feature layer editable, you can also select what editors can do. You can set, for instance, the ability for them to do everything: add, update, delete features. You can set them to only update certain attributes or only add new features, and a few other permutations. The other thing that we introduced not too long ago, I think it's been about a year now, is the concept of feature layer views. So you can now create a view on top of a feature layer, which acts as another feature layer. It's very much like a database view. So this view on top of a feature layer can have different settings, like they can have different sharing settings, different editing properties, different export properties, different filters, different metadata, different time settings. So what you can do is you can have one base feature layer with your feature information inside, and then you could, for instance, create a view that's only shared to a certain group of field workers who are collecting data and putting data into it. Then another view that's shared out to, say, some curator group, which are allowed to actually edit and modify the data to clean it up. And then you could have another view that's shared out to the public, which maybe is read-only and only allows the public to see the final product. And all that with just having one data set, basically, that you're all working off of with different permissions. One thing to note there is that there is a setting in your portal which is called Allow Only Standard SQL Queries, which should be left on. So this is on by default, and this means that your feature services and feature layers only accept standard SQL. You can switch that off. There are some use cases where you want to use more sophisticated SQL that is not in this standard SQL list that we have documented. If you do that, then there's the possibility that some of these views, people will be able to create filters that can get around the view. So we basically recommend not to switch that off if you're going to use feature layer views to disallow access of certain attributes and information through the view. Now let me talk a little bit about different authentication options in ArcGIS Online. So there's three different ways that you can identify yourself in ArcGIS Online. One is you can create an ArcGIS Online account. This is just simple username and password that we store and create on our infrastructure. You can use social accounts, so you can enable your portal to allow social accounts, and your users can then come in from Facebook or Google. Or you can federate with your enterprise identity system. So if you have Active Directory or LDAP or other systems within your organization, you can federate those and use those as your identity for your users. With ArcGIS Online accounts, you can also enable multi-factor authentication. So this is where you use a second factor, which is your smartphone in this case, with Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, where you have a number that changes every 30 seconds. And in addition to your password, you also have to provide that. You can enable this on your organization, and you need to have at least 2 admins in that case, because typically you would set this up on your administrator or privileged accounts. And by having 2 administrators, they can back each other up. If someone loses their phone, then they can go and reset each other's information. And then each member then sets up their own multi-factor. There's a few steps to actually getting there. You have to scan a barcode and so on, but then they can each set up their own multi-factor authentication. You can also customize a password policy. So the default password policy right now that we have is 8 characters with at least 1 number. But you can customize the length, the complexity, so you can use different character classes. History requirements, so how many passwords before a user can reuse their old passwords, and expiration. So every, say you want to have your users change their password every 90 days, you can set those things up. If all these settings don't satisfy some of your policies for your enterprise, for your security teams, you can use your own identity provider, so your enterprise identity. This is done using something called SAML 2.0. So this is a spec that allows that is a standard that allows trust to be set up between ArcGIS Online and your identity system. And at that point, your users go and log into your identity system, like your Active Directory. They get authenticated, and then we get a message that basically says that they've been authenticated, and we let that user in. We have a documentation on how to set this up with about 6 different popular identity providers, ADFS, NetIQ, Shibboleth, and some others, but it should basically work with any SAML 2.0 compliant identity provider. You can set this up so anybody who goes through the authentication process on your identity system logs in and is allowed into your organization, or you can do it by invitation. Since ArcGIS Online is licensed by user, you might want to limit who has access to it, so you could do it by invitation if you wanted to. You can also mix and match identities from enterprise identities and ArcGIS Online identities. So you might have your employees log in through your enterprise identity system, and say contractors or third parties you create ArcGIS Online identities with. We've recently also introduced the ability to sync up your enterprise groups with ArcGIS Online groups, so you can set up this this relationship between a group in ArcGIS Online with something in your Active Directory group, and when someone logs in who's a member of that group, we automatically add them to the group in ArcGIS Online. So that allows you to give them access directly to certain items and other things that you might want them to have access to when the first time that they log in. And in the last release just a few weeks ago, we added the ability to do SAML federation. So up to now, we've only supported one identity provider per organization. Now, if you have something that will support SAML federation, you can actually use that, where you can have multiple identity providers for multiple groups of users. This is actually something universities use, so there's some fairly well-known SAML federation identity systems out there that we can now integrate with. Other things to talk about, other settings in your portal, there's when you go in and set your settings in ArcGIS Online for your organization as an admin, there's a security tab, and so within that there's various settings. Some of them are, for instance, to use only HTTPS. So basically encrypt the information between your browser or your clients and our servers. And this is on by default, so always use HTTPS. You can switch this off, but we recommend you don't. So if you switch it off, it's usually because you have mixed contents. You're trying to pull in information that is not over HTTPS, and that's when you start getting browser warnings and things not working well in the browser. That's getting less and less frequent. We strongly recommend that you always use HTTPS, and Michael will talk about our efforts. We have some roadmaps where we are going to require that over time. You can also, if you enable HTTPS, we already support HSTS, which stands for HTTP Strict Transport Security. This is a way of us telling the browser that for your particular portal, for your particular URL, to always use HTTPS. So even if you have bookmarks, for instance, that are in HTTP, the browser will convert them over to HTTPS. So that makes it even stronger, stronger use of HTTPS. Other settings, you can disable the ability for your members to share to everyone. So for some organizations, you definitely don't want to do that. You don't want to make anything anonymously accessible. So you're able to disable that. You're able to set up purchasers, or these are the people who can actually go to the marketplace, our ArcGIS marketplace, and actually purchase things there. You can set up admin contacts. So these are the admins who will get contacted for things like expirations and running out of credits and various security notifications of various types. So make sure you set those up. And then you can disable your your profile biographical information for members so that members don't actually enter anything there. This is for compliance reasons. A lot of times enterprises don't want to have members enter PII information, private information, into these fields, so you're able to actually switch them off. A few more slides just on various things. You can keep track of your usage of information for ArcGIS Online in our status reports. So this gives you, it's more usage information, but also in terms of security, you can see who's doing various things, public items, what members are in the system, and so on. There is also something we've added new, which shows you the system health of ArcGIS Online. So we've always had our health dashboard at status.arcgis.com, but now we've integrated it into the new look of our organizational pages, so you can actually see if there's any events that might affect you inside of your organization pages. And then finally, a concluding slide on just recommendations of all the various things I've talked about here. So just in terms of best practices of organizational settings, we do strongly recommend that you leave HTTPS only setting on. You don't switch that off. You leave the standardized queries setting to be on also. Those two are defaults, so don't touch them. Make sure that you set up the right admin contacts, especially if people leave or you change admins in the organization, because we send a lot of sort of admin-focused alerts to those folks in terms of security and expiration of your subscription and so on. Enable MFA, or the other option is use your own identity provider. That gives you much stronger sort of authentication control. Be careful of editable feature layers, making those public. Make sure that you really mean to do that, and use views to restrict access in different ways for different groups of people. Set up custom roles. Don't have too many admins, right? So some organizations like to just set everybody as an admin, but that's a very privileged user. So set up custom roles so that you can control who has access to what. And then if you're a private org who doesn't share any information publicly, make sure you disable the public sharing flag on your settings so that nobody can make anything public. And also disable your anonymous access on your organization so that when someone goes to that URL, they have to log in first and get to actually see any information. Anyway, so now I'm going to hand it over to Michael, you want to come up here?
Yeah, you can just go there. Just toss that up there.
Okay.
Excellent. Go boom.
Without making too much noise.
You're attached.
There we go. I knew I would do that. Yeah.
I'll take that.
Which one?
Yeah.
Oh, you got it.
Cross wires. Everybody awake now? So we'll just do something until we all electrocute each other or something.
Yeah.
There we go. Awesome. Okay, so as far as myself, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Esri's products and services. I've been with the company about a little over 14 years. I did previously, it's good, 4? Awesome. I did previously help out customers with their enterprise architecture deployments, including system architecture and security architecture design workshops. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about was a little bit about deployment architecture and options to consider with ArcGIS Online and how it fits in with other products. So ArcGIS Online being our multi-tenant software as a service offering, managed services, more of a single tenant, so we can spin up ArcGIS Enterprise separately for your organization. We have cloud images available. Your organization can go out and actually download those and play them against different cloud environments. We support roughly 6-7 cloud environments now. I think it's officially 6 today, probably 7 soon enough. And then we also have products that you can deploy on-prem, ArcGIS Enterprise. Now, as far as a key part about this, as far as security, is who's got the ball to do what. For on-prem, of course, your organization has got it end-to-end. But what about these cloud images? I actually received a request through our incident response team about, hey, is your cloud image STIG certified? And a STIG is a secure technical implementation guide. It's from the defense side of things. In other words, saying, hey, do you do something to do security hardening of our image? And the answer is no. These images are out there for ease of use purposes, for your organization to be able to take, manage, maintain, and run with on your own, but they don't have security really embedded within them. We do have Esri Managed Cloud Services. They have the Advanced Plus specific version that has a FedRAMP Modder authorization. The other permutations currently of EMCS currently don't have a security certification behind them. And then you have ArcGIS Online, which has a FedRAMP Low authorization in place as of just a week and a half ago. As you'll see on the top bar, we have this slight shading of the ArcGIS Enterprise, ArcGIS Online area, and that's the shared responsibility area. Andrea talked about items such as your organization choosing to configure SAML or using the logins built into the product. So that would be an example of your choice in your organization to control a security function. Now, as far as how these hosting options might play together, ArcGIS Online is a solution that you can spin up in minutes, provides you more centralized geographic information discovery. It's multi-tenant, as mentioned, and has that FedRAMP tailored low authorization. For on-premise, it's something you can typically spin up in months, or if you're on defense side of things, sometimes years, to get running behind your firewall, and you manage and certify it in your own organization. And last but not least is Esri Managed Cloud Services, a solution that's in the time frame of weeks typically to get up and running. It's taking ArcGIS Enterprise, spinning it up in the cloud specifically for your organization. And as mentioned, the Advanced Plus version has a FedRAMP Moderate. Now, as far as quickly running through a couple scenarios, I wanted to go through the concept of users and what might be most appropriate. If you want to share and process operational data with field workers, ArcGIS Online by itself might be appropriate for your organization. It has rapid deployment, low total cost of ownership. You can utilize the base maps that are already available for you, and it can easily handle what's called low impact data sets. Now, as far as another scenario, what about I want to have a pilot solution that incorporates base maps and some ArcGIS server specific features? That's a scenario which you might want to add cloud images to. And that's where you can, remember I talked about this prototype concept, build something to suit your needs, ArcGIS server and portal, and you manage the security of that as necessary. As far as if you have some more sensitive internal data, but also want to segment out and use the cloud for less sensitive data, that is another common hybrid deployment option. And SAML Enterprise logins are used for the ease of use in ArcGIS Online, and then you can have Windows integrated security for that internal operations. EPA's FISMA authorized Geo platform is an example of such a solution. Now, one of the things about this FedRAMP authorization, the security team from the sponsoring organization or agency was very interested in if you register an ArcGIS server service, what type of information is going into ArcGIS Online. So I'll talk briefly about that, where you can have a group in ArcGIS Online. You can register a service and basically have that ArcGIS service URL available in that ArcGIS Online group. If you're utilizing enterprise logins, it makes access for these users when they request. It'll make that use of that organization's identity provider. And then the user's request actually goes separately over to the ArcGIS server instance. The key thing being that we're not grabbing your data from your ArcGIS server and taking it into ArcGIS Online as part of that process. So in other words, the internal and cloud data sets are combined at the browser, and the browser makes separate requests for each to these different sources and does a mashup of that information. Token security with TLS, formerly known as SSL, or even a VPN connection could be used between the device browser and on-premise system. Now, we also go through a couple of use cases relative to this authorization to get people comfortable with what are some good ways to use the solution in an accredited manner. For the first use case is quick public dissemination of information, publishing tiles for fast scalable visualizations, sharing information with the public. There's this new authoritative content label that could be used with this for sharing information in a manner that there's strong assurance by the end customers. In the second use case, we talk about sharing operational data within or between businesses, and this is making use of that registering ArcGIS server services in ArcGIS Online and storing sensitive data on-prem or some other authorized environment. And ArcGIS Online operates as a discovery portal in this model. And it can, for ease of use, utilizing enterprise logins is highly recommended. And actually better security. Now, Andrea hinted at some upcoming significant security changes. We've been looking at doing a transport security improvement roadmap and have just started to throw out some dates during this conference. This will be a disruptive process for a number of customer operations, if not tested ahead of this transition. And we're going to have some broad announcements forthcoming. So the first change is about disabling TLS 1.0 and 1.1. And this is in alignment with both PCI requirements, which a large number of commercial organizations need to adhere to, as well as FedRAMP standards from the government side. We're planning on doing this in the December 2018 release at this time, and you'll want to start checking out our TLS guide to understand compatibility of products with different versions in the Trust Center. The second major change is disabling HTTP for all organizations. And we're planning on doing this in the September 2019 release. Enabling HTTP allows us to use HSTS, which Andrea hinted about a little bit, across our domain as opposed to just covering specific services as it does now. That was deemed inadequate by some organizations, so we're going to evolve our model. Maps, services, and apps with HTTP embedded calls will break and will need to be fixed. We've been adding capabilities to make this transition easier. There's a update map layers to HTTPS area within ArcGIS Online now, so I suggest you look at that early on. Does this create a lot of consternation for anybody in the room? If so, let me know. Raise your hand. Not too bad? Okay, nobody ran out immediately. That's a good sign. That's an example of the more difficult side of security. A lot of things you can do transparently, and we have been making a lot of transparent improvements. And you'll hear more about some of them, such as data encryption. But others aren't as transparent always, and they can be very disruptive. So we want to make sure we're working with you through that. As far as compliance, I'll talk a little bit about some of the milestones over time we've achieved, what you can look at for cloud infrastructure provider compliance assurance, what we're doing for our products and services that relate with ArcGIS Online, and what we're doing with GDPR and FedRAMP, in other words, privacy assurance and security assurance. So we've been working with compliance needs for the ArcGIS platform since the early 2000s when FISMA initially first started in 2002. We had a solution we worked on together called Geospatial One Stop and got a FISMA authorization of that. And more recently, we've done our GDPR alignment for Esri and also the ArcGIS Online FedRAMP authorization. As far as our cloud infrastructure providers, we utilize both Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Services, each of which have extensive compliance information and documentation about each of their certifications. We actually provide links to those compliance areas on our Trust site. So on the Trust Center, you'll see on the Compliance tab, At the bottom of that, it talks about our cloud infrastructure providers. You can link directly to their materials. As far as our products and services, a little bit of information on what we do there. For ArcGIS Server, since 10.3, we've been doing this thing called a DISA STIG. I talked to you a little bit about that STIG concept earlier, DISA, Defense Information Services Agency. And this is a nice guide that you can use for security hardening your deployment in a standardized manner that doesn't break the product. And that's actually, even though it still says 10.3 right now, it was last updated just a couple months ago, and we validate it for each product release through 10.6. ArcGIS Desktop, we've been supporting what's called the United States Government Configuration Baseline since 10.1, and for Pro since 1.4.1. Some of the service-based initiatives we support for compliance, Esri Managed Cloud Services, Advanced Plus Rendition, that single tenant offering has a FedRAMP moderate, and ArcGIS Online, which is a multi-tenant offering, has that FedRAMP tailored low in place now. As far as moving on to privacy, we have this EU-US Privacy Shield certification in place, along with a general privacy statement and a supplementary statement, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And then Trustee, as an organization, provides privacy certification and dispute resolution. Last but not least, we have alignment with the General Data Protection Regulation. Now, as far as a little bit more context on privacy and what's behind it, it's actually a growing field quite rapidly right now, and it is going to affect us even more so in the US, as California just passed their own version of GDPR just about a week ago. Now, as far as personal data in online services, one of the questions is who owns the data? The customer, of course. Who's responsible for categorizing those data sets? The customer. We actually are staying out of your data. It is your data to manage and maintain. We're not reading and analyzing to find out what you're doing in your own operations. Are there any restrictions for processing personal data set types? As we recommend that customers not store sensitive personal data unless it's encrypted first or pseudonymized before posting for storage, such as with a security gateway. So a security gateway can actually encrypt a particular field, such as a social security number, before it gets stored into ArcGIS Online. What laws govern my data? For government agencies or entities, it's the applicable laws of the customer's jurisdiction, and non-government, it's US federal and state of California. Where is your data for ArcGIS Online? Our online services are all within the United States on US soil, and we provide adequate, quote unquote, adequate data privacy safeguards being in place. That's a quote from GDPR. And this is assured through our Privacy Shield compliance. As far as another aspect of GDPR, they require privacy impact assessments. We've been doing these since the early 2000s for online services. And we welcome assisting customers with their privacy impact assessment needs as necessary. We're actually working on a best practices white paper for GDPR and privacy, and that'll be released within probably the next month here. Now, the supplementary privacy statement I talked about earlier, this is an interesting one, and it's fairly near and dear to me because it's about ensuring that when we're selling you a product and service, we ensure a more rigorous level of privacy for your organization. So the privacy you get when viewing Esri marketing is different than when you're using ArcGIS Online and the materials there. So for privacy collection and storage of privacy information, we minimize it in our products. We have this online telemetry service, EUEI. You'll see it in the user interface of ArcGIS Online, and it's disabled by default for organizations outside of the US. If you're in the US, you can disable it if you want. As far as it's collecting anonymous information, so it's not even collecting your client IP information. We've also made some company-wide improvements with the privacy relative to our organization. Tracking cookies can now be disabled centrally. Have some people seen the cookie banners on Esri.com? Is it more annoying than helpful, or helpful than annoying? Annoying, yes? Yeah, see what? I'm shocked. My condolences, but yeah, that was a requirement driven by GDPR. You'll see that actually if you hit the Learn More button, there's a little toggle switch for controlling your privacy options of turning on and off tracking cookies. So there actually is tucked away a useful switch, but it is somewhat annoying, I agree. Anyways, let's see, when Esri is controller of customer private information, these requests can be handled through privacy@esri.com. Now, as far as cookies, marketing-focused tracking cookies are not used across paid-for ArcGIS Online services, no matter what that cookie setting I just talked about is set to. As far as how we go about protecting, ensuring that part of the privacy requirements saying you got to have some security requirements. So we, as an organization, I've worked on establishing a more formal security development lifecycle in 2017. And and that includes addressing our governance structure of having the CISO of products, my role, as well as a CISO for overall company operations. We now have guidance based on the Build Security In and the Open Web Application Security Project and the Common Web Enumeration, tongue twisters, listings. And those help provide coding and development guidelines to various organizations. Now, the most rigorous security measures we put in place are with initially ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online. This includes static, dynamic component analysis and even third-party pen testing. We also established a product security incident response team last year called a PCERT. And when you go to the trust site and you say report an issue, it actually goes to that team. For our FedRAMP tailored low authorization, it helps drive continuous monitoring in our operations. And last but not least, a nice change for ArcGIS Online security. Your data sets written after March 10th are encrypted at rest automatically. So any pre-existing data sets will be encrypted by the end of this year. As far as breach notification, we notify customers within 72 hours of confirming a data breach has occurred. And customers may report concerns directly to our PCERT team through the trust site as mentioned. If you need to have restriction of processing for legal holds or otherwise, online records can be identified in your organization, exported and deleted by your admin. And the customer admin could also disable user access or call our support team, and we can disable the overall org as necessary. As far as consent, another key aspect of privacy assurance, at a contractual level, we now have a data processing addendum, a DPA. It's pre-signed out there, ready for the customers to make use of out on the trust site. And for web forms, when we present to you a form that asks for your address information or PI about you, otherwise, we also provide awareness about our privacy statement and ask for consent. As far as for cookies, pages with marketing, tracking cookies have those consent banners I already mentioned. Now moving on to our FedRAMP authorization, we received the ATO just June 28th, and this authorization is also known as a Low Impact Software as a Service authorization, has strong value to both government organizations as well as global organizations. It's recognized as a gold standard out there, and we have a mapping of the ISO 27001 and other security controls out in the Trust Center for you to look at. As far as aligning with FedRAMP requirements, we do have guidance to how you should think about configuring the security aspects your organization is responsible for. It's called a customer responsibility matrix. Some of those items use HTTPS only, enable only SQL standard queries, disabling the security policy allowing members to edit biographical information, and enabling SAML enterprise logins, disabling social logins, adding relevant domains for allow origins, and enable using Esri vector base maps under the gallery area in the product. As far as in general, I gave a brief overview of what we're doing about privacy, security, and we also have additional information answers out in the trust site. If you look at the ArcGIS Online Cloud Security Alliance answers, that's over 30 pages of questions. So if you have a team who needs to have a lot more depth, that is out there and available for them. Last but not least, we've introduced a new security tool for ArcGIS Online and helping out, give you some perspective of where your organization stands. It gives you usage against security best practices. It also provides both organization and user level audit log visualization. The tool is available at arcg.is/AGO advisor. And I'll just quickly attempt to pull that up here. Hopefully. There we go. Close that one out. And I'll sign on. And I've already been into this once with a particular organization. You can see my account information up here. As far as which user, I'm signing on with an administrative account. Now it's already analyzed in that amount of time that I just opened that up. It's already looked at my organization settings and given me feedback. So I can see that there's some information relative to policies I should check out, security policies. I can see standard SQL queries is currently disabled. I go, oh, that's not good. I wish I could do something about that. Let me go to my organizational settings. And that'll set you up to log in to ideally your organization. And it's only as fast as our wireless connection, so hopefully good. And so it takes you into your org. I can see it's not checked for allow standard SQL queries. Enable it, save it. Wait for a confirmation that it's saved. Maybe. Yep, there it is. Settings saved. Go back. I can just rescan my results. And boom, hey, look at that. My security policies are nice and clean. The standard SQL queries is gone. We also have this organizational change log, so I can see my actions. I can see, hey, this character here changed. There's a difference in the standard SQL queries. It went from being false to true at this time, and it was from this IP address. I also can do user queries, so I could, any user in my organization, I want to see, hey, so Bob said he did X, and you have a conflict of information. Well, you can actually check and see what's gone on there with a particular user account. So that's a brand new capability from our team that we've been working on with Andrea's team. Now, an interesting aspect of this is we were able to immediately show the value of this even before it got released. We're contacted by an organization who received a warning from the anonymous hacktivist group. Said, we're looking at likely attacking your organization. They made it posted on the internet and stuff like that. And so this organization had 8 ArcGIS Online organizations, a whole bunch of ArcGIS Enterprise deployments. They said, hey, what can we do as an initial starting point to make sure we've done at least a bare minimum? So for the ArcGIS Enterprise stuff, they use the Python scripts to check their on-prem deployments. And for our ArcGIS Online, they were able to just take this URL. By the way, there's 8 separate org administrators. So one person was able to send the URL to those 8. They all analyzed it and adjusted their settings as necessary. As far as moving ahead, we are looking at additional enhancements to it over time. I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but if you have enhancements after you look at it yourselves, feel free to reach out to us at softwaresecurity@esri.com. In summary, we have our new FedRAMP tailored low authorization and GDPR alignment, ensuring ArcGIS Online security and privacy capabilities continue to advance. And we have significant security advancements that are coming that could directly affect your operations. We talked about the HTTP going away and TLS. So read the TLS guide now. We're going to have much more information added to that guide as we learn more from your teams. We also have extensive security, privacy, and compliance information available on the trust side in the Cloud Security Alliance answers, and we have that best practice validation tool available. If you want to learn more, check out the Trust Center. With that, we welcome you to fill out the survey. Hopefully, we always welcome to hear what your opinions are and how we can improve. This was the ArcGIS Online and Introduction to Security and Privacy Compliance session. With that, I would like to briefly open up the session to any questions.
Is there access to that security preview from your administrative page or your administrative?
It's not on there yet. Yeah, how do you get to it?
Yeah.
Right now is truly just the URL that we have access to it. How much it may or may not get integrated into ArcGIS Online as a whole, that hasn't been finalized at this point. So it really is the same thing as you could consider a business partner related app as far as how it interacts with ArcGIS Online. But yeah, and the link to it actually will be out on the Trust site too. So it should be pretty straightforward to get to.
Question.
Yes.
Do you have a setting for sharing that the users can share the content?
Yes.
So can you do a mixed? Like you have that checked, some users can share, some users can't?
Yeah, so the question was whether you can allow certain users to share to the public and certain others not. No, currently we don't. So it's a setting that sets it off for everyone. The only exception to that is administrators are allowed to still share to the public. So you could have them be the ones that are sharing out to the public if you wanted to set something up like that. But no, generally right now we don't have anything that allows you to grant a subset of users that privilege.
And honestly, for the most part, you want to limit a lot how much all users are allowed to publish to the general public, because we do run into recurring issues of people accidentally posting information to the public that they didn't realize, and sometimes even leaving information editable. And that's not just even a Esri software as a service solution. One of the things talk about in another session we already had, WebGIS security session, was Gardner says 95% of all cloud-based breaches will be due to a user misconfiguring that cloud environment. So, and you can see that right now through Amazon S3 buckets. There's huge breaches happening, and it's weekly right now still. And it's been, Amazon's trying to figure out what to do. They've helped try to create tools. They have monitors to try to keep awareness and notify people. But that's still one of the #1 breaches for very large scale organizations. And so, as I mentioned, we have customers sometimes misconfigure that too. So it's a double-edged sword, right? It's a lot of power, but it's a very dangerous one too. Any other questions out there? Well, with that, one more.
On that same track, did you say that once it's out there, you can't change it to anything?
Oh, that setting? I think it's just a configuration setting.
You mean this? Once you share something, you can't No, you can unshare it anytime. Right. I mean, once you find it, you can unshare it, and it won't be accessible anymore. People will just get a not found or not accessible type of errors.
Yeah. What's funny is one organization who had accidentally shared too much and made something also editable. The way they found out was they reported it to our support team as a performance issue. Right, because when you have something publicly editable, performance is slower. And then it's sort of like, yeah, you're right, but really, you shouldn't even have it configured like that way at all. Please change quickly. And they're like, oh yeah, performance is better now too. So it's those types of things happen, and that was last week, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyways, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.